Hello and good evening. I am back to go through the next chapters in Genesis, and we're going to get almost to the midpoint of the book of Genesis tonight, but we're going to go through a different chapters 20 through 23. It's interesting because we gain a bit more insight about something that we've already talked about in chapter 20. Abe's sister. Again, I had to shorten it because I only have a certain amount of characters allowed for the title. So when we went back to Abraham, to Genesis 12, when Abraham and Sarah went to Egypt, he wanted Sarah to tell them that she was his sister because she was a very, very pretty woman. And he thought that the Egyptians wanting them for herself would kill him. So he's like, how about you tell him that you're my sister instead of my wife, and so I can be spared. And then obviously some plagues came upon Pharaoh, and he's like, what the heck? If I had known, I never would have done this. Take all this stuff and get out of my country. So the same thing is going to happen here in Genesis 20, because it kind of goes back to the "O ye of little faith." Do you not trust God that he's going to take care of you? Like, he's leading you around these parts, and he's leading you into these situations. Why would he not take care of you? Why would he not protect you? I mean, and this is after he's given Abraham all of these promises, the promised land promise, the natural seed promise, the spiritual seed promise. So knowing that all of these promises are yet unfulfilled, but they've been given by God, and Abraham accepted them by faith, and he believed God, and it was counted to him for righteousness, Genesis 15:6. And then God covenanted unconditionally with Abraham in Genesis 15, 16, 17. We read those stories. So why doesn't Abraham have more faith? Oh, ye of little faith, right? So he's going to be in a similar situation. He's going to do the same thing. Well, we learned one little tidbit of information here in Genesis 20 that we didn't have prior. Abraham wasn't technically lying when he called Sarah his sister, because apparently in Genesis 20 we learned that they had the same father. They had different mothers, so technically Sarah was Abraham's half sister. The part that comes into play is the fact that he should have claimed her as his wife, as she was, and he did not, for the reason that he thought that he would be killed, people coveting her for themselves, the Pharaoh in Egypt, and now this king of this other place that they're about to visit. So instead of being truthful and honest, and not getting themselves in these situations, and more to the point, not bringing woe upon the leaders of these countries, the Pharaoh in Egypt being plagued because of this, and Abimelech, as we read, is about to endure hardships on account of Sarah. So he couldn't take it too far, because again, Sarah's going to bear Abraham the promised seed. So God's not going to allow a situation to occur that would put that at risk. So we kind of see a situation where, because of a bit of dishonesty, there were people put through undue hardships. And God's like, you need to learn to trust me. Well, we see the fruition of that faith come to be strengthened when we get to chapter 22 with the near sacrifice of Isaac. So clearly Abraham did learn some lessons through this. But we see kind of a repeat of the situation that we saw earlier with Sarah and Abraham in Egypt, and the Pharaoh, and them not being completely honest with the situation, and putting Pharaoh in a situation that he did not ask to be put in, and didn't know that he was putting himself, or that he was coveting someone's wife. He did not know that. Well, Abimelech didn't either. So let's find out what happens in Genesis 20. So we're done with Lot, and we're done with Sodom and Gomorrah, and let's move on to the next story. What happens when people don't tell the truth? Hardship, because they don't trust that other people will do the right thing, and they don't trust that God has it in hand. Genesis 20, verse 1. Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. Abraham said of Sarah his wife, she is my sister. And again, that's not a complete lie, just a half truth. because technically she was his half sister, but he should have told this king that she was his wife. Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Yeah, because he didn't know he wasn't supposed to, because he didn't know she was already claimed. He had honest intentions toward her, but he shouldn't have done that because she was already spoken for, but he didn't know. God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said unto him, Behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, she is a man's wife. So God stepped in and told this guy, hey, look, no, because Abraham he wasn't completely honest, and neither was Sarah. So they put this guy between a rock and a hard place, and God stepped in and told him the truth. He gave him a chance to redeem himself because Abimelech did not have bad intentions. But Abimelech had not come near her because he wasn't trying to do the wrong thing. He said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, she is my sister. And she, even herself, said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. He's like, I didn't have any ill intent. I was going to do right by her. But again, never should have happened. God said unto him in a dream, Yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her, because God had it in hand. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. If thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. So he's like, okay, now you know you shouldn't have taken her. So now you need to let her go back to her husband, because if you don't, because now you're going to die and they're going to suffer in your house if you don't do the right thing. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all the servants and told all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. And Abimelech called Abraham, said unto him, What hast thou done to us? And what have I offended thee? What thou hast brought on me and my kingdom a great sin. Thou hast done deeds unto me that thou ought not to be done. Abimelech said unto Abram, What sawest thou that thou hast done this thing? Abraham said, Sure, because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. So he had fear, and so he lied as a result of it and brought undue hardship on these guys. God intervened and said, hey, look, here's the situation, so go do right, go fix this. Otherwise, you'll be punished. But since you did it in the integrity of your heart, I'll give you a chance to make this right on your own. And so Abimelech did, but he confronted Abraham, and he's like, why did you do this? It was all unnecessary. And now, I'm standing to possibly incur the wrath of God because you lied to me. What did we do to deserve that? Clearly nothing. But because Abraham lacked faith that God would preserve and protect in that situation, he put these people through undue hardship. And yet, indeed, she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father and not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. So he explained the situation. He said, I was afraid that you would take her and you would kill me. She technically is my sister because we share the same dad, not the same mom, but she really, truly, technically is also my wife. It came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house that I said unto her, This is the kindness which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, saith he is my brother. And Abimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants and gave them unto Abraham and restored him Sarah his wife. Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee, and with the other thus she was reproved. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had closed fast all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. And that he did to preserve the integrity of the bond between Abraham and Sarah, because Sarah was to bear the promised seed of Abraham. So knowing that Abraham and Sarah were going to put themselves in a situation that could have ended differently had Abimelech not had integrity, he made it so that Abimelech was ill and couldn't try to take Sarah to wife and do things with her that would have caused the Isaac situation to have not occurred. So after everything was restored to its rights and Abraham wound up being enriched out of the situation, then God set Abimelech and his family back to right so that they could bear their own children and leave Sarah alone. And so that was done. So we have a couple of situations here where we've seen that Abraham has tried to cover his butt because he lacked a little bit of faith, thinking that God would bring them through these situations and these places. So they told half-truths, falsehood, lies about the relationship between Abraham and Sarah, thinking that Abraham would be killed and Sarah would be taken because she was beautiful. So twice we have this situation. And Abraham and Sarah were both called out in this situation. They were called out in Egypt when the Pharaoh said, I'm having these plagues brought upon me. Why? Because you lied to me. Take this stuff and get out. And now Abimelech is doing the same thing. He's like, what did we ever do to you to where you would cause God to potentially punish me and all of the people in my household because I did this thing acting with integrity, not knowing that I shouldn't have because she's your wife. So twice they've been called out for this. It's like, okay, Abraham, Sarah, you guys need to step up to the plate and have some faith in your God, that he will put you in these positions and carry you through and not allow you to, be killed or any harm to come to you. We've got these covenant promises that he made that haven't been brought forth yet. So let's trust God. Let's have some faith here. Genesis 21. And just as he had promised in Genesis 18, when he was covenanting with Abraham, not covenanting, when he was promising that a year later he would come back at the same time to see Sarah conceive and bear Isaac. So now we see this brought to fruition from originally in Genesis 18, and now Isaac is going to be born in Genesis 21. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised the son Isaac, being 8 days old, and as God had commanded him. That was the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 16 or 17, when that was commanded to do. After God covenanted with Abraham, he told them to circumcise all of the males in the house from 8 days old and after. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. She said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made him a great feast that same day that Isaac was weaned. Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. So Sarah had a real big problem with Hagar and Ishmael, even though she's the one that instigated that whole situation, telling Abraham to take to do what he did with Hagar. That was like her whole situation. And then she had a problem with both of them after that. The thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah has said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. And this is where we understand that even though Hagar has been told that her son would be multiplied by a lot, he would be the father of a huge, huge nation, that God would enlarge the descendants of Ishmael. We learn here that Isaac, and we already learned that Isaac was the promised seed. Also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. Now this is interesting, because in the Abrahamic covenant promises in Genesis 12, there were 3 parts: the promised land promise, the natural seed promise, and the spiritual seed promise. So we have a promise through Abraham, that his descendants would number as the sands of the sea, as the stars of the sky, the dust of the earth, all of it, innumerable, uncountable. That is not only going to come apparently through Isaac, which we know that it's going to, and we know that the religious leaders believed themselves special on account of springing from the loins of Abraham through Isaac. John the Baptist in Matthew 3, he says, think not to say within yourself, we have Abraham to our father. For I say unto you, God is able of these stones to raise up children to Abraham. Now the axe is laid to the root of the trees. Every tree which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. So being part of the natural seed isn't what saves, it's being part of the spiritual seed which saved, which is through Christ. But we also learned that Abraham is also going to be a father of a great nation through Ishmael. But Ishmael is not the promised seed. That's the difference. So just being part of the natural seed of Abraham is not what saves, regardless of whether it's through Isaac or through Ishmael. The difference is Isaac was the son of promise, and he was the seed who the Redeemer would come through his line. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the 12 tribes of Jacob. Judah is the tribe that produced our Lord Jesus Christ, who was the fourth son of Jacob, who was renamed Israel. So there's a whole line there and a whole story there, but clearly Ishmael is going to have many, many, many descendants also on account of being the son of Abraham. And that we learn in Genesis 21:13, and also the son of the bondwoman, Ishmael, will I make a nation because he is thy seed. That's just not the promised seed. Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. She departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. So he hearkened unto the voice of his wife because the Lord told him to, and they were sent away. The water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. She went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot, which is interesting because he becomes an archer later. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. She sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. So they were sent away with not much to eat and not much to drink, and she thought they were going to die in the wilderness. So she was weeping. And God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, what aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. Just not the promised great nation. God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer, which is why it's interesting that she put him a bow shot away. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. Just as a side note, Psalm 83 lists the Ishmaelites and the Hagarenes as two of the groups that come against, that hate Israel on account of, or that try to get at Israel on account of their hatred toward God. Hagarenes are those who come from Egypt, which was Hagar's descent. She was an Egyptian maidservant, and thus she took a wife for Ishmael out of the land of Egypt. So that the Hagarenes are Egyptian, and the Ishmaelites are obviously the descendants of Ishmael, which again was a union that never should have happened because Sarah and Abraham didn't trust that Sarah would be the mother of the promised seed, and they tried to help God along when he clearly did not need it. It came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, because again, they're living on Abimelech's land at this point. He enriched Abraham after he sent Abraham and Sarah away, because he was like, why'd you lie to me? You didn't need to do that. So he let them dwell on his land after that whole story. So they're still there. It came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God, thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. Abraham said, I will swear. And Abraham reproved Abimelech because of the well of water, which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. Abimelech said, I wot not who hath done this thing? Neither didst thou tell me, neither yet I heard of it but today. And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of a flock by themselves, and Abimelech said unto Abraham, what mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, for these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me, and I have digged this well. Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they swear both of them. So Beersheba is the well where Hagar and Ishmael were when God saved them, and Abraham apparently digged this well, and they're covenanting with Abimelech, peace between them, all that kind of good stuff. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech rose up, called the chief captain of his host. They returned to the land of the Philistines. This well at Beersheba will come into play later, which is why it's being brought up now. Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. So that's where that's introduced. It'll come into play later. So we will return to it when the time comes. So we have these situations where Abraham did not possess a great deal of faith when he should have, because he should have trusted God. Now comes the big test of faith. Abraham was not justified by what he's about to do. He was already justified, and he's proving his faith through this action that he's about to take. This is the whole conversation of, I'm not going to get too much into James 2. I believe Romans 4 talks about this too, but it's the proving the faith through works. You're not justified by works. The works simply show that you have faith, and they are an outward demonstration of an inward condition. That's what we see here in Genesis 22, is that Abraham had faith. There's been several times where he has been able to demonstrate that, and he has chosen not to because he was fearful to a point. And so now it's coming down to the wire. It's like, okay, at what point is Abraham going to really, truly trust in the Lord and demonstrate this? He's said that he has faith, and he's been declared righteous. And God's put him in a couple of situations. So let's put him in this one, and let's see what he does. Does he trust God? Yeah, he does. Genesis 22:1. It came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, here I am. So he's like, you said you have faith. I know you do have faith, but I really want you to prove it to me. He said, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest. When he says only son, because Isaac is the promised seed, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell of thee. So he's like, I'm 100 years old. My wife's 90. She was barren. But you told me I'd have a son, and now I do. And you told me he's the promised seed, that I'm going to have innumerable descendants that come through him. And now you're telling me to kill him, to offer him as a burnt offering before the Lord. Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place which the Lord had told him. He did it without a second, without reserve, without reservation. He trusted completely in the Lord God. What's interesting is that we find in Hebrews that he had a different thought about this. In Hebrews 11:17, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, that he had received the promises, offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. So he thought at this point that God was going to resurrect Isaac. That was not necessary. But he did this without reservation in complete and total faith. Then on the third day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, My father. He said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here am I. He said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. So this wasn't that Abraham was justified by this work. It's that this was a demonstration of the faith that Abraham already possessed. He thought that God would raise Isaac up. That was not necessary, because all God wanted to do was prove Abraham's faith. Because Abraham had had a couple of chances and he blew it. So this was a big test and Abraham passed. This is where we're also introduced to the angel of the Lord speaking out of heaven. In the previous video that I did, talked about the theophany and the Christophany, how the angel of the Lord speaking out of heaven is a reference to the Christophany. It is the incarnation, and we will see this in later chapters, like when Jacob wrestled with God. The angel of the Lord is a manifestation of the Christophany. The word speaking out of heaven, that's Jesus. We're about to further see that this is a manifestation of God, not just an angel, like any old angel, or even like a Gabriel or a Michael. This is specifically God. The angel of the Lord is God. It is a figure of the Christophany. And we will see that clearly in the next few verses. Verse 13, Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. Jehovah Jireh means the Lord will provide a sacrifice, ultimately leading to the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Verse 15 of Genesis 22, the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and he said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord. So the angel of the Lord calling to him out of heaven says, By myself I have sworn, saith the Lord. So the angel of the Lord is the Lord. It's a Christophany. Why is he swearing by himself? Because there is no higher authority upon which he can swear. The Lord God cannot lie. He is truth. So he's swearing by himself an unconditional oath that requires no consent from Abraham. This is a reaffirmation of the Abrahamic covenant. And God is swearing by himself because, again, there is no higher power upon which to swear. And he is truth, which means that he is binding. What he is saying is binding. He said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing and not withheld thine son, thine only son. Reaffirmation of the natural seed promise. That in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is upon the seashore. Promised land promise. And thy seed shall possess the gates of his enemy, the gate of his enemies. Spiritual seed promise. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. And lest anyone thinks that that is actually talking about the blessing coming on the earth through Isaac, it is not. And we learn this in the book of Galatians, chapter 3, starting in verse 8. And the scripture foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, in thee shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. He did that in Genesis 12 when he was originally covenanting with him, again in chapter 18, and again here in chapter 22, talking about the spiritual seed promise that would come through his line, preaching the gospel that Jesus, the Redeemer, was going to come through the seed of Abraham. In thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Why? Because thou hast obeyed my voice. Because you had faith and you trusted me and you proved your faith through obedience. Not that you were justified by works, but that you proved that you had faith through your works, which again is an outward manifestation of an inward condition. So Galatians 3:8 explains this. Scriptures foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, in thee shall all nations of the earth be blessed. Spiritual seed promise. So then they which be of faith are blessed with faithful Abraham. Verse 11, but that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God, it is evident, for the just shall live by faith. Verse 14, that the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit by faith. Verse 16, now to Abraham and his seed were promises made, not the promised seed that comes through Isaac. Why? He saith not into seeds, plural, as of many, which is the natural seed promise, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiply I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven and as the sand of the seashore, which is the sand which is upon the seashore. Again, Matthew 3, think not to say within yourself, we have Abraham to our father, for I say unto you, God is able of these stones to raise up children to Abraham. So in Galatians 3:16, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not into seeds as of many, not to the natural seed, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. So in Genesis 12, 1 through 3, we have the original Abrahamic covenant promises. Promised land promise, Genesis 12, 1. Natural seed promise, Genesis 12, 2. Spiritual seed promise, Genesis 12, 3. And we have reaffirmations of that. First, you have the promised land in Genesis 12, 15. And then you have the promise that Isaac is going to be born. And you have Abraham and Sarah trying to take matters into their hands with Hagar and Ishmael. No, that's not what God intended. So then Isaac is born. And Isaac is the promised seed, the seed through which all of the multiplication of Abraham's descendants would come. Doesn't mean that Ishmael wouldn't be made a great nation, because he would be, because he also came from the loins of Abraham. But Isaac was the promised seed, and the Abraham covenant promises of the natural seed, numbering as the sands of the sea and as the stars of the sky, would come through Isaac. But the eternal promises would come through the spiritual seed, which is Genesis 12:3. And that is reaffirmed in Genesis 22:18. And in thy seed, to seed as of one, which is Christ, shall all nations of the earth be blessed. Why? Because thou hast obeyed my voice. So it's very, very important to understand that from the outset of the Abrahamic covenant, there were 3 different promises incorporated. And there is an absolute division between natural seed and spiritual seed, because just being part of the natural seed of Abraham is not what saves, and is not what the eternal blessings are tied to. The eternal blessings are tied to faith, which is through the spiritual seed, which is Christ, which is why Galatians tells you that God preached the gospel before Abraham, saying that in thee shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. What gospel was that? That the Redeemer would come through Abraham's line. Genesis 12:3, restated in Genesis 22:18. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. It came to pass after these things, it was told Abraham, saying, behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor, Huz the firstborn, and Buz his brother, and Kemuel the father of Aram, and Chesed, and Hazo, and Pildash, and Jidlaph, and Bethuel begat Rebekah. That's important, because Rebekah is going to come into play in the next couple of chapters. And who marries Rebekah? Isaac. These 8 Milcah did bear, and Nahor Abraham's brother. And his concubine, whose name was Reumah, she bare also Teba and Gaham and Thahash and another name I can't pronounce. Rebecca is the important thing to remember there, and she's going to come into play because Rebecca will be Isaac's wife. So the final chapter in this video, and then I will stop because there is one other thing that, and actually there's one more thing I do want to talk about before I get to this next chapter, and that's the link to Revelation. We have been told that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, the natural seed that will number as the sands of the sea and as the stars of the sky, innumerable. We actually, I'm going to go to Hebrews 11 to bring that word in, innumerable, because it is important for this context. Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11, 8. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. By faith, he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Through faith also, Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sands which by the seashore innumerable. It's interesting that we have this word innumerable. So we have dust of the earth. Well, I will make of thee a great nation, right? Dust of the earth. If you can count the dust on the earth, that's how many descendants you're going to have. Sands of the sea, stars of the sky. And now we have the word in Hebrews, innumerable. So you have the promised land, or excuse me, the promised seed through Isaac, going to have innumerable descendants. Ishmael, he's going to have a whole bunch, going to make him a great nation too. So through the lines of Abraham, you have 2 lines. Ishmael going to be a great nation, but Isaac also going to be a great nation, and he's the son of promise. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, 12 tribes. Again, Jesus comes through the tribe of Judah. He is through the line of Isaac, okay? And Jesus is the promised seed. He's the one whom all nations of the earth be blessed. Genesis 12:3, spiritual seed promise. Revelation 7, the spiritual seed promise. The eternal promises, the heavenly promises, the sons of Abraham, we become the sons of Abraham by faith in Christ, by faith in the promised seed who came through Abraham's line. Yes, Abraham was promised to have natural seed that number as the sands of the sea and as the stars of the sky, innumerable. But through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the promised seed that came through Jesus, what do you see in Revelation 7 as having been redeemed, standing in the throne room in glorified forms before God the Father, who Jesus leads to living fountains of waters, feeds from the tree of life, wiping away all tears, wash their robes, made them white in the blood of the Lamb, were withheld or kept out of this great tribulation. What do you see in the throne room relating to these sons of Abraham that we become on account of our faith in Christ, adopted into this family? What do you see? A great multitude that no man can number. Innumerable descendants. Just like Abraham was promised to have. That in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Yes, Abraham is going to have descendants that number as the sands of the sea through Ishmael. Yes, Abraham is going to have descendants that number as the sands of the sea, the stars of the sky, the dust of the earth through Isaac. And Abraham is also going to have descendants that number as the sands of the sea, as the stars of the sky, innumerable, a multitude that no man can number through the spiritual seed, which is Christ. And that is evidenced in Revelation 7. The multitude that no man can number is a direct correlation to the spiritual seed, which is through Christ. Yes, Abraham was promised that he would be made a great nation through the natural seed. It's not the natural seed that saves, it's a spiritual seed. And that will also be a great nation. In fact, a multitude that no man can number, just like sands of the sea and stars of the sky and dust of the earth. That is a testament to the grace of God, that the amount of people that will be saved is innumerable. And that's Revelation 7. That is not Trib Saints, folks. That is spiritual seed of Abraham through Christ Jesus. Genesis 23. I will end on this chapter. Sarah was 107 and 20 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in a place the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of my burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, Hear us, my lord, thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres, bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. And he communed with them, saying, If it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me to Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of the field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give it me for a possession of a burying place amongst you. And Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even of all that went in at the gate of the city, saying, Nay, my lord, hear me. The field give I thee, and the cave that is therein I give it to thee. In the presence of the sons of my people, give I it thee, bury thy dead. And Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land. And he spoke unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, But if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me. I will give thee money for the field, take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying unto me, My lord, hearken to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead. So Abraham is trying to buy land to bury Sarah and his dead, and these people are trying to give it to him. He's like, no, please let me buy it from you. And they said, what's a little money between brethren? And Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver, which he named in audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money with the merchant. So he did buy it. The field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre. I want to check one thing here because I don't want to misspeak, but yep, this is what will become the cave of the patriarchs. So Sarah is first buried here, but it is what was going to be called the cave of the patriarchs, and it's in Hebron. In the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave, which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field that were in all the borders round about were made sure unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth before all that went in the gate of a city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And that exists to this day. And the field and the cave that is therein were made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth. So yes, that is what will become the cave of the patriarchs. So I'm going to stop there. And next we are going to see the story of introducing Rebecca, Isaac and Rebecca. Almost halfway through the book, not quite, but a little bit interesting to me because the reaffirmation of in the wake of the near sacrifice of Isaac, the reaffirmation of the Abrahamic covenant promises makes it clear that there are three distinct parts: the spiritual seed promise, the natural seed promise, and the promised land promise. The spiritual seed promise, while it is separate from the natural seed promise, descendants that would number as the sands of the sea, stars of the sky, dust of the earth, innumerable. Ishmael, we learn, also had the same promise given. The difference is he was not the promised seed, and the Redeemer would not come through his line. So through Ishmael and through Isaac and through Christ, you will have descendants that number as the sands of the sea and as the stars of the sky, innumerable. And the only one of those three that saves, the eternal promises, the heavenly promises, are associated with the spiritual seed, which is through Christ. But clearly you see that it is associated also with an innumerable number, which is evidenced in Revelation 7. The redemption of that group of people is a multitude that no man can number. Exactly what we are told in Genesis. So I just wanted to point that out. As always, if you have questions, comments, or feedback, let me know. Thank you guys for listening in. Have a great rest of your evening. Hi, Monkey. Welcome. And good night.